With a sound legal framework in place, the next critical question is implementation. A law that is not enforced is merely a suggestion. Therefore, we now turn to the engine that brings the law to life: strict law enforcement. Dear friends, when we talk about the rule of law, what role does strict law enforcement play? To explore this question, let me begin with a well-known story from ancient China, that is, establish one's credibility by rewarding people for moving a log. This is a story that took place during the Qing dynasty. According to records of the grand historian, in order to gain the people's trust before initiating his political reforms, a reformer named Shangyang took a very wise and far-reaching measure. He placed a tall wooden log at the southern gateway of the market in the capital city, and he announced that anyone who could move the log to the northern gateway would be amply rewarded. People did not believe it. They discussed and questioned how there could be such an easy thing in the world to obtain a great reward. A person was bold enough to attempt his task and succeeded. Shangyang did not hesitate to fulfill his promise, and the person was immediately rewarded with a generous sum of money. After that, the people were convinced that Shangyang was one who kept this word, so that the innovation of the Qing dynasty could be implemented smoothly. This story also became a model example in Chinese history. This story tells us that the law must be credible, and the credibility and authority of laws come from strict enforcement. First, we will introduce the essence and the significance of strict law enforcement. What is the essence of strict law enforcement? Strict law enforcement is not an abstract or obscure concept. It is closely related to our real life. The strict law enforcement means transforming laws on paper into laws in practice. It requires enforcement authorities to carry out their duties in strict accordance with legal procedures, ensuring that the law is effectively implemented. So, what is the significance of strict law enforcement? We can understand the importance of strict law enforcement through the following three quotes. The first quote is, "In the governance of a country, it is the enforcement, not the enactment of law, that presents the greatest challenge." The Ming Dynasty statesman Zhang Juzheng once remarked, "In the governance of a country, it is the enforcement, not the enactment of law, that presents the greatest challenge." Zhang's emphasis on legal enforcement manifested in his leadership of the new government's reforms. The reforms temporarily restored domestic stability and economic prosperity because of the comprehensive enforcement mechanisms. Zhang maintained that the Ming legal code already contained abundant statutes and regulations. The problem, in his view, was not the lack of law, but the lack of compliance. The law is vividly praised as the criterion of social life. However, if laws exist only as words on paper or regulations in documents, they are no different from castles in the air and are unable to fulfill their intended function. Only through strict law enforcement can the laws on paper be put into practice and have a real impact. The second quote is, "The vitality and authority of the law lie in its implementation. To advance law-based governance, it is imperative to uphold strict law enforcement. As a well-known saying goes, the vitality and authority of the law lie in its implementation. Just imagine that. If people ignore the law, if authorities fail to enforce it, or if violations go unpunished, then even the most well-crafted legal rules will become nothing more than symbolic ornaments. They will have no real impact. More importantly, they will fail to protect the legitimate rights and interests of the people. I will use an analogy to illustrate vividly. Think of the entire rule of law system as a large, flourishing tree. The law is like the soil. It provides nutrients that support the life of the tree. Law enforcement is like a seed, and only when it takes root and sprouts in the soil can it grow into a towering tree. The third quote is, "No matter how many laws we have, if they are simply left on the shelf, they mean nothing." President Xi Jinping said, "No matter how many laws we have, if they are simply left on the shelf, they mean nothing." The purpose of legislation is to maintain social order and uphold justice, ultimately achieving the well-being of the people and national prosperity. When enforcement is weak or inconsistent, public respect for the law gradually diminishes. A dangerous cycle may emerge in which those who follow the law suffer losses, while those who break it reap benefits. For example, China's civil code encompasses comprehensive provisions that govern various civil relationships. If practical issues like contractual disputes or torts between parties cannot be effectively resolved in accordance with this code, the legislative purpose will go unfulfilled, and the public will fail to develop the habit of respecting and complying with the law. Over time, a pattern of law without enforcement will ultimately erode public trust in both the government and the rule of law. Strict law enforcement is more than a procedural requirement. It is essential for sustaining the credibility of legal institutions. From Shangyang's insistence on strict and impartial enforcement to today's efforts in advancing the rule of law in China, strict law enforcement has always been the cornerstone of a civilized legal system. Laws cannot become mere decorations, but they must function as effective instruments of justice. Only when the law carries real weight can it truly safeguard social equity and ensure that justice is not just promised but delivered. Next, we will examine how to comprehensively promote strict, procedure-based, impartial, and non-abusive law enforcement. Strictness is the basic requirement of law enforcement. The procedure-based approach is the code of conduct for law enforcement. Impartiality is the value pursued by law enforcement, and being non-abusive is the professional quality of law enforcement. Only when the law is enforced in a strict, procedure-based, impartial, and non-abusive way can it be implemented properly. In this way, the people's sense of gain, happiness, and security can be more fulfilling, secure, and sustainable. Firstly, set up strict standards. In the field of law enforcement, strict standards serve as a strong line of defense, and no compromises allowed. Law enforcers are supposed to carry out their duties unswervingly and unreservedly in accordance with the law. and to adopt a zero-tolerance attitude towards illegal acts. This ensures that the rigid constraints of the law can be fully brought into play. Let's look at the case. Yangtze River Ecological Protection. Around New Year's Day in 2021, a special farewell took place on the side of the Yangtze River. An old fisherman solemnly handed an ancestral fishing net, a tool he had long relied on to make a living, to the Fishery Administration Department. It marked his farewell to the identity of a fisherman and the beginning of a new role, the guardian of this river. What's the story behind this scene? Let's approach the 10-year fishing ban on the Yangtze River to understand both the iron fist and the tenderness behind the efforts to protect China's mother river. The Yangtze River has paid a heavy price for overfishing. In the summer of 2007, scientists stood on the shores of Dongting Lake and saw the vast water surface covered with dense fishing nets. The meshes of the nets were so small that even the fingers could not pass through. Scientists were so worried as the fishermen were eager to cast their nets to catch even the fingernail-sized fry. The depletion of biological resources and worsening environmental degradation made it clear that only strong law enforcement could rescue the Yangtze's fragile ecosystem. Thus, a 10-year fishing ban has been implemented to protect the ecosystem and biodiversity since 2021. This policy serves as a vivid example of China's commitment to stricter law enforcement and adhering to a strict standard in environmental conservation. The strict implementation of the fishing ban has been ensured through a comprehensive regulatory system, multi-sectoral coordinated enforcement, sound legal penalties, and diverse social co-governance. Provinces and cities along the Yangtze River have established a three-dimensional supervision system. It integrates water, land, and air patrols with the human oversight, technical equipment, and advanced monitoring technologies. This approach ensures full coverage in inspections and eliminates blind spots in law enforcement. A multi-sectoral joint law enforcement mechanism was set up to strengthen the supervision of the ban. Many retired fishermen became fishery guards, while the public actively participated in monitoring and reporting. Penalties have been increased in accordance with the law, and those offenders are held legally accountable. Both online and offline methods are also taken to fully promote awareness of the fishing ban policy. This strict enforcement posture, like a sort of deterrence, has effectively discouraged illegal fishing activities and brought renewed vitality to the Yangtze River. According to the data in 2023, the distribution range and the visible frequency of rare species have increased significantly over the 3 years since the fishing ban. The aquatic biological resources have shown a trend of recovery and improvement. In the Yueyang section of the Yangtze River, the rate of excellent water quality has reached 100% for 3 years. The population of finless porpoises, once on the brink of extinction, reached 162 individuals by the end of 2023. Great changes have also taken place in Dongjiang Lake in Zixing City, Chenzhou, Hunan Province. Before the fishing ban, the fish farming area had become overcrowded with fish during July and August, resulting in oxygen depletion and serious water pollution. Nowadays, the lake is crystal clear, with the scenic islands dotting its center. In 2023 alone, it welcomed more than 10 million visitors. Secondly, promote humane law enforcement. Law enforcement is not just the code enforcement of provisions. It also reflects the brilliance and the warmth of human nature. In China, humane law enforcement has quietly emerged and is flourishing as a new concept and practice model. This concept is best understood through two concrete examples. Let's consider the first case, which vividly illustrates how humane law enforcement radiates the humaneness of legal governance. The 10-year fishing ban on the Yangtze River has also composed a symphony of law and humanity. Alongside the enforcement of the ban, the state provided warm support to help fishermen transition away from fishing. Over 160,000 fishermen have bid farewell to the life of floating on the water and found new paths forward with the government's help. Some have donned uniforms and become guardians to protect the mother river. Others received skills training and transformed into ecological farming, continuing their fisherman's tale. Still, others opened farmhouses and entertained tourists with their whole fish feasts. The government not only provided vocational training and entrepreneurship subsidies, but also offered insurance for every fisherman to ensure that they have a good life after going ashore. The rule of law guards the clear water, and the humaneness warms the hearts of the people, which is the Chinese wisdom behind the rebirth of the Yangtze River. Wenzhou government actively explores the governance mechanism of the street store economy to promote the integration of hustle and bustle and urban civilization. Take the innovative governance of the street store economy in Wenzhou, Zhejiang province as an example. As night falls, city lights, food aromas, and the vocals of the crowd become the urban hustle and bustle that touches the hearts of the mortals. But how can a city preserve such vibrancy without compromising order and cleanness? Wenzhou gives the answer with civilized law enforcement and warm service. In the past, street store operations in Wenzhou's alleys were often regarded as a stubborn disease that affected urban environmental sanitation, traffic order, and commercial layout. Whenever the urban management officers appear, the vendors are like frightened birds. In the screams of "the urban management officers are coming," they hurriedly pack up and flee. Law enforcers often adopt crude and straightforward methods of banning, which leads to constant conflicts between themselves and vendors. Such a method is stifling the potential of the street store economy and failing to meet citizens' growing demand for diversified consumption. The transformation began with the street store reform. Instead of expelling vendors, authorities designated dedicated night market zones, set reasonable operating hours, and implemented a series of supportive policies to provide comprehensive services. Law enforcers went deep into the streets, patiently explaining policies, listening to vendors' concerns, and offering practical solutions. In Lucheng district, persuasion before penalty policy was innovatively implemented. This permits 24-hour vending alongside credit-based access and a single comprehensive inspection mechanism that replaced rigid bans with smart monitoring. Wuhai District introduced a color-coded dynamic management system. A first violation triggers a green warning. A second violation results in a yellow alert. And only repeated violations receive a red card penalty. While Rui'an utilized mobile apps for real-time oversight, prioritizing reminders over on-site enforcement. As a resident commented, Wenzhou today retains its lively spirit, yet tastes even sweeter with civility. These measures have fostered an organic coexistence between the city's lively spirit and the civic order, embodying the modern law enforcement philosophy of education first, punishment combined. By integrating technology empowerment, discretion standards, and educational guidance throughout enforcement workflows, law enforcers uphold legal boundaries while demonstrating the wisdom of balanced and humane governments. Thirdly, ensure procedure-based enforcement. Procedure-based enforcement is the supervision and constraints of law enforcers to ensure that law enforcement is carried out within legal and reasonable boundaries. The full process record system for law enforcement implemented in China is a typical measure. For example, traffic police officers are required to wear body-worn cameras while on duty, recording both audio and video throughout the entire process, from approaching the parties, inquiring, collecting evidence, to issuing tickets. This not only documents and retains the evidence, but also prevents unfair or violent law enforcement. Similarly, in food safety inspections conducted by market regulation authorities, law enforcement officers must present official identification to explain the basis for inspection, allow merchants to make statements and defenses, and the inspection results must be made public. These practices highlight the essence of procedure-based enforcement. Not only should the law enforcement results be correct, but the procedures must also be lawful. Procedure-based enforcement is like putting a rein on the exercise of law enforcement power. It enables law enforcers to dare to enforce the law and also regulate law enforcement, ultimately earning public trust in the rule of law. Fairness and impartiality are also essential principles in law enforcement. Law enforcement activities should uphold objectivity and neutrality, treating all individuals without bias, and adhere to the principle that everyone is equal before the law. Ancient Chinese legal culture emphasized that the law does not favor the powerful. It underscores that justice shows no partiality to those in high positions, just as the ruler remains straight and does not bend to personal will. No matter how wise or brave, no one can escape the judgment of the law. Punishing offenses does not exempt powerful officials, and rewarding good deeds does not overlook common people. In conclusion, from Shangyang's historic act to today's Yangtze fishing ban and Wenzhou's vendor-friendly reforms, China's commitment to strict law enforcement has consistently adhered to a core principle: anchored in legal standards and rooted in people's livelihoods. Strict enforcement is not a code and a rigid rule, but a shield for justice. It is the fertile soil where public trust in the rule of law takes root.